lumbar spinal injections, which help me take away that image from the patient's mind where they sort of see you as a butcher with a knife held in his hand, sitting in the OPD waiting for you to come and take them to operation theater. And not even that, to get you out of sometimes very difficult and tricky situations where you yourself are not sure that whether to reoperate your own patient who is not doing well after the surgery. A lumbar spinal injection may be given with two intentions. One, a diagnostic, or with a therapeutic intention. So what are the various types of injections? They can be lumbar selective nerve root blocks or transforaminal epidurals, facet blocks, which are the intra-articular facet blocks, the medial branch of the dorsal ramus of the spinal nerve, blocking that branch, the interlaminar epidural, the caudal epidural, and I have also included disco block as the anterior segment block. So the facet and these are the posterior segments blocks, the epidural is the middle, your canal segment, and the disc is the anterior segment. So the common indications for these blocks are to address radiculopathies, which may be secondary to lumbar disc herniations, stenosis, spondylolisthesis, or sometimes even with your surgery you have a slight malpositioned screw which is like grade 1, less than 2 mm encroachment. You know it's going to settle, but you sort of try to elevate the pain of the patient by not making him to wait for such a long time. Or it may be given with a diagnostic intervention. You have a couple of discs or 3 discs in the lumbar spine. You want to know which one of them is causing the problem. You don't want to operate on all the discs and extend your surgery unnecessary. So this is something which can help you to get to the right disc. The common contraindications are that patients who are on anticoagulants, do not give them the blocks. If anticoagulation can be stopped safely, refer patient to the doctor, get a window of anticoagulation for at least 7 to 10 days, and then you decide for the blocks. Presence of dense neurological deficit, patient having significant weakness like foot drop or cauda equina, you don't give blocks to these patients. Even if the patients ask for, I will not give it, because medico-legally, if anything happens, it's going to bounce back on me. Severely stenotic canal or foramen, where the nerve is already so badly compressed, I am a bit fearful to inject a volume into that same constricted space where I can increase the pressure effect, and because of the pain relief, patient will not be able to even report the first sign of increasing compression, which would be pain in such situations. Uncontrolled blood sugars, patients somewhat who are on borderline like 200, 250 blood sugars, just a simple steroid can trip them over to a DKA, or they start getting urine, ketones in their urine and all, which becomes a tricky situation. So always get their sugars controlled before we proceed. The prerequisites are good quality imaging which don't leave any doubt for diagnosis. I do a blood count, PT-INR, creatinine, and Triple H as hospital requirement. Check for allergies, shellfish especially, because people who are allergic to shellfish are also allergic to the radioiodine dyes. Antiplatelets, if patient is on, let the physician or the cardiologist see the patient, let him certify that yes, it can be stopped safely, and you do the procedure and restart it 3 days after the procedure. Somebody who has gone a recent angioplasty, don't, in the last 1 to 2 years, don't ever take that risk of stopping the antiplatelets yourself, because the stent, if it gets blocked, the cardiologist is going to blame the thing on you. Lumbar root block is a pain relieving procedure, and blocking a stent could become life threatening. So don't trade such sort of a small thing for a larger thing. I keep my patient's NBM for 6 hours, because if I have to administer sedation, if the patient is uncomfortable, I am more happy doing it. My anesthetist is on the standby. He or she will be more happy doing it if the patient is NBM. Radiation safety is of utmost importance. The responsibility lies with you. The radio technician or the radiographer should be trained Avoid unnecessary shoots. Use a lead apron, use a thyroid shield, use a radio protection goggles. They are very easy to get. You can get your own or from the cath lab. You have the cardiologist using the radiation goggles. You can always borrow it from them. Keep your hands away while taking the shoot and protect the patient and the staff from unnecessary exposures. So two terms which I said in beginning, the selective nerve root block and the transforaminal epidural. They are like cupcakes and muffins. So more or less they look like the same, but the best part is that cupcake has got icing on the top. So similarly, in selective nerve root block and in transforaminal epidural, the difference is that transforaminal epidural has got a slight advantage of having that icing of relieving a part of back pain because the drug injected is more. So in selective nerve root block, the needle is slightly more cranial towards the nerve root, whereas in transforaminal epidural, it will be slightly lower, just above where the superior facet is ending, because you're aiming for that epidural space and not sort of trying to inject near the root. The dose in selective nerve root block will be 0.5 to 1 ml, and in transforaminal we give larger volumes, and the desired effect. So we are primarily looking for a nerve pain relief in selective nerve root block, whereas transforaminal we are looking for more therapeutic, like to get better effect. Selective nerve root block can be used for diagnosing the questioned root. Transforaminal epidural is more with a therapeutic intention. Although you may be trying one procedure and it may become other. It happens quite often because the window is very narrow. At S1, whatever you do, it's going to be a transforaminal epidural because the space is so huge that it's going to trickle to the canal and go into the epidural space. At L5, you need to be more tricky. Usually at higher levels, it's going to be more selective nerve root blocks because it's a bit difficult to target. The neuroforamina are small, the pedicles are shorter. So which drug to inject? So the most common drug which we use in our orthopedic practice, the dipomedrol, if you read the label, it clearly says that it's not meant for intrathecal or epidural use, and the serious side effects could include convulsions, meningitis, seizures, paraplegia, and sensory disturbances. This is primarily because of the preservative used in the thing. The books mention triamcinolone. They are mostly books authored by foreign authors. In India, triamcinolone also contains a preservative, so don't use that regular triamcinolone for the epidural also. The concept we have to understand between a particulate drug and a non-particulate drug. So what is a particulate drug? A particulate steroid is a drug which has got a size of less than 7 microns. Why 7 microns? Is because the tiniest thing which can squeeze through a capillary is your RBC. So if your RBC is able to squeeze through a capillary, this drug, if it gets stuck into that capillary, it can cause an ischemia. Inadvertently, if you do an intravascular injection, it can cause ischemia. So dexamethasone, betamethasone are non-particulate drugs, but the disadvantage is that they get weaned off very early. So in lumbar spine, we take that advantage and we give the particulate after a negative aspiration. But in dorsal or in cervical spine, we do not give these drugs because the risks involved are very high. So let's have a look at this case. A 66-year-old female, CKD on hemodialysis, extremely flail, gets severe pain and radiculopathy, not fit for a surgery. I mean, the risks involved are too high. So we get the patient to the operating table, make her lie prone on bolsters, get a good AP view. There should not be any rotation. There should not be any obstructing things in the C-arm view. There should not be radio opaque pillows and all of that. This is the typical setup. I am giving a left-sided block. The OT technician or the nurse is standing behind me. The C-arm is coming from the opposite side and I have screen in my view. Square the level, superior end plate of the level where you are intending to the block. So in this case, in this view, L5 is not parallel. So you give a bit of lordosis to make the L5 end plate parallel. And then you tilt to get it into the Scottish dog view. where you see it obliquely and all. Now in this case, the L5 is slightly oblique because I'm intending L5 and S1, so I'm doing it in the both in a single stage. And this is the final setup. Paint and drape like a surgical procedure because it is injection going into the epidural space. The drugs which I use 3 syringes so that I do not mix the medicines which are there. It's a clear instruction. My 10 ml syringe has got lignocaine for local injection. My 5 ml syringe has got Omnipaque or the iohexol, the contrast medium, and my 3 ml is the drug delivery mixture. So I infiltrate with local and I put my 23 gauge spinal needles into the place. I check them in AP and lateral view for position and I give us 0.3 ml or smaller amount of contrast to just get a good epidurogram. You can see the epidural spread of this drug over here, and after a negative injection, I inject 0.5% bupivacaine, which is mixed with methylprednisolone acetate without preservative, 40 milligram per ml, and I inject 1.5 ml to 2 ml at each site. A second case, a 36-year-old male having a cranial extrusion on the right side. So the route in question here will be the exiting route, which will be the L4. So my target is L4 route over here. So you see this Scottish view. I get my needle perpendicular down towards the foramen. Check in the AP and lateral view. Your needle in lateral should be in the posterior 1/3 of the foramen. I inject a bit of contrast medium and I give a drug to it. Another patient, extremely frail lady, had undergone a surgery 10 years back. A fixation was done, but now she has got an inferior adjacent segment disease and severe radicular pain. So this, we gave a root block at both levels. This is the traversing route of the lower level and this is the exiting route of the lower level. So both of the routes were targeted and patient had extremely good relief, and the surgery in this situation could be avoided and a patient like that can be taken care of. Another case where a fusion was done long ago, L4 to S1, there was a route in question. The patient was having left gluteal pain. So we gave sequential blocks. First we gave a sacroiliac block to target if the pain generator was coming from sacroiliac joint, but this did not relieve the patient. In the second part, we gave a root block on the exiting route of the L5S1 where the compression was radiological, and that gave patient a good relief. So sacroiliac joint was sort of negated out of the equation because this was the pain generator. Facet blocks in situations we can give where the pain is more facetogenic, and we inject very small amount intraarticular, 0.5 to 1 ml. So like in this 46-year-old male patient, you see the needle bang into the L4-5 facet joint. Check in the lateral view. I do not inject contrast in here because the space is already very small, and patient gets a good relief. Or a patient with a disc who desperately wants relief, I may combine my root block procedure with a facet block procedure in the same sitting to give patient a long-lasting relief, because I know my diagnosis, patient just wants a long-lasting relief, so both can be combined. Medial branch block, our pain management colleagues usually do before they sort of select that nerve for ablation, and if the patient gets good, then you can relieve with this medial branch. You can select the patient for radiofrequency ablation. And this is how you target. You target that nose area of the Scotty dog, the top part where it joins with the ear. That is your target point, and you inject 0.5 ml bupivacaine in this. If the patient gets good relief, you let the patient be happy. If the pain recurs, you can do a radiofrequency ablation in the second stage. So post-injection, whatever you do, observe the patient for 30 to 60 minutes for any neurological weakness or any deficit. Make the patient walk. Note down the numerical pain rating scale or VAS scores on paper so that you document that how much relief the patient had. Give local ice packs for compression, and always call the patients for a review 3 to 5 days down the line. Caudal epidurals more or less are sort of getting obsolete now because it is less specific, although in certain situations at L5S1 pathologies you may still use them for a better pain relief than an interlaminar epidural. but we can use it for very selective cases. And provocative discography, which over the time has become obsolete, and even disco blocks, which included injecting a small amount of drug into the discs, is sort of a procedure which needs to be taken with a bit of pinch of salt, because you need to be very careful in which disc you are selecting for fusing. In my routine practice, I do not fuse for minor back pains and all. So it's something which I don't practice. To conclude, they are the best friends a spine surgeon can have. Even in difficult situations, they can make you get out. There is a learning curve, but we are more trained because of our CM and radiological exposure. Case selection is very important. Patient expectation should be set right, that this is a temporary procedure. If your pathology gets regressed, it's permanent for you. But if it comes back again, I might have to do something situation. And as I said, it can rescue a spine surgeon from very difficult situations. Thank you very much.